This fresh coat of the startup life has been sprayed on nice and smooth by Wagner and the Flexo series of paint sprayers. Startup Nation, my wife decided she wanted to rehab her childhood home. The goal was to fix it up and invite a nice family to rent it out. We knew one of the biggest jobs we had to undertake was painting. However, from the walls, the cabinets, and even the siding outside, it was going to be a big task. As entrepreneurs with a company to run, we knew this was going to take up a lot of our time, which is why we decided to get a paint sprayer. And after much research, we decided to go with the sprayer from the Flexio series from Wagner. Startup Nation, these sprayers are top-notch because of its flexibility to paint or stain walls, furniture, cabinets, and more. It's 10 times faster than using a paintbrush, which was a big selling point for us. And you can paint or stain right from the can. It's also easy to clean in 5 minutes, and being great for indoor and outdoor projects, a paint sprayer from the Flexio series clearly needs to be part of the arsenal in your garage. So if you're ready to stain your deck, or like me, fill your daughter's request of a bubblegum pink room, up your game with a paint sprayer from the Flexio series by Wagner. Take it from me, your time will thank you.
It's time to be about that life, the startup life. Here's your host, Dominic Lawson.
All right, Startup Nation, so I hope you're ready to receive some value today. My name is Dominic Lawson, and this is The Startup Life, the show for entrepreneurs and career-minded professionals. So, Startup Nation, when we're diving into our business and we're building our businesses, we focus on sales, we focus on building relationships. But one of the things we also should definitely focus on is ethics and integrity. And we have the perfect guest to kind of help us out with that today. He is a graduate at the University of Virginia and Harvard Law. He's a former federal prosecutor for the Department of Justice, and he is currently the chief ethics officer at Airbnb. He is also the author of Intentional Integrity: How Smart Companies Can Lead an Ethical Revolution. He is the one and only Rob Chesnut. How's it going, Rob?
Man, what an intro. I'm doing great. How are you doing, Dominic?
I can't complain. Are you ready to pour some knowledge into Startup Nation today?
I'm going to try. I'll do the best I can here.
All right, so let's do it. So, Rob, if you would, please, sir, just kind of share with us your origin story and your background, if you would, please, sir.
Sure. I grew up in Virginia. Went to law school, spent the early part of my career in the Justice Department. I used to prosecute drug dealers, bank robbers, armored car robbers.
Wow.
Some of the older members of your audience may have heard of Aldrich Ames. He was a CIA employee who famously spied for the Russians. So I prosecuted Aldrich Ames. I happened to be the lawyer that did that. But you know what? It's hard being a prosecutor in that it's a very negative job. You're kind of presiding over the end of someone's professional life. They're going to go to jail for a long period of time. And I really wanted to do something positive. I love business. And so I started looking around about how I could make that transition. And I was really lucky, Dominic. There was a little company in the jurisdiction where I was a prosecutor.
Gotcha.
That everybody kept calling me about. And I said, I got to dig in on this. I got to find out what this company does. And the name of the company was America Online, AOL. They were in Reston, Virginia.
Right.
And so I got their disk, stuck it into my computer, and plugged my phone line into my back of my computer. And that's when the internet sort of opened up for me. I'm like, wow, this internet thing looks pretty cool. I think it might actually, have some legs. So I started using different sites on the internet, and one of the sites I started using was eBay.
Okay.
And I started using eBay to buy and sell photography equipment. And it sort of hit me one night that, wow, I bet you that eBay's got problems with fraud and illegal items and government regulation. I wonder if they could use a federal prosecutor. So I looked on the website. I honestly, I didn't know where San Jose, California was. I kind of been to LA before. That was it.
Right.
They didn't have any jobs open on the website, but I figured it can't hurt. So I sent my resume to jobs@ebay.com and figured, I'll never hear anything from them. And come home from work the next day, and there's a voice message. I was having dinner with Meg Whitman a week later out in California, and I quit it all and moved to the West Coast and I was employee 170 at eBay. And ran North America legal for them and started and ran their trust and safety department. Sort of tried to figure out how you stop fraud in internet platforms, and built out a team of 2,000 people to do that. And then after 10 years at eBay, I became the general counsel at a company called Chegg, and that's for the younger millennial audience will know Chegg as the textbook.
Myself. Yeah.
Oh yeah. And then from Chegg, I became the general counsel at Airbnb. And was the general counsel at Airbnb for almost 4 years, and moved over to become their chief ethics officer, and sort of getting into the whole concept of integrity in companies.
I hear that. Thank you for sharing that. Really quick follow-up question. Kind of share with us those early days of eBay, because I'm always fascinated about, companies in the Valley and those origin stories. Just kind of share with us your experience in those early days, just a little bit.
Yeah. It was quite an interesting experience coming from government, right? I remember coming out, and the whole company was on 2 floors of one building. And I'm thinking, man, oh man, I quit my safe government job, and it all depends on this relatively small group of people. And in my first couple of months, I noticed that the website was having trouble. Like, as soon as you go into the website, and it was like not working. And at one point, the website went down for 23 hours. And we're talking about serious outages at that point. I mean, the traffic to the web, the good news is there was a lot of traffic to the website, and it was very popular. The bad news was that we couldn't handle it. And so I'll tell you, it was, the CEO sleeping in the ops room. It was exciting. And it was an interesting time to be in the Valley. But I tell you, I loved the energy. I loved the idea that we were connecting people around a common passions, and we were actually enabling people to make money, which I thought was really cool. That's what I wanted. I wanted to get out of this world of putting people in jail.
Right.
And I wanted to get into this idea that people from different parts of the world actually have more in common than they realize. And what we need to start to understand each other and get closer to each other as human beings. And we got to enable commerce. So for me, eBay was like right in line with what my passions were all about. And, with 170 people, everybody's chipping in, and everybody's got a role in the business. And that's what I love about startups. That's what I love about entrepreneurialism. And that's what eBay was like.
I hear that. Thank you for sharing all of that for sure. Once again, Startup Nation, we're talking to Rob Chesnut, Chief Ethics Officer of Airbnb and the author of Intentional Integrity, How Smart Companies Can Lead an Ethical Revolution. So let's dive into the book, shall we? So, and you can share this if you want, Rob. That's totally up to you. But I know the book was kind of pushed back a little bit because people, given this our new normal, COVID-19 and the pandemic, people have been reaching out to you as far as ethics and stuff like that. And you're actually writing another chapter in the book. Kind of share with us that a little bit, if you would.
Right. I thought the book was done.
Right.
It was January. I kicked back. I was really excited to finally get this thing. I've been working on the project for about 18 months because I had a full-time job.
Right.
I was running the Airbnb legal department while I was doing this book. So I'm thinking, thank goodness I finally got this done. And I didn't realize fully how the COVID-19, which was basically just in China at that point,
right,
was going to take over the life and for the rest of the world. And so they shut the offices down. I get back home and somebody says to me, "Hey Rob, too bad about this COVID-19 thing. How's that going to impact your book? Is anybody going to care about integrity?" When business is focusing just on survival. And I know my immediate response was, now more than ever,
Absolutely.
It's important.
Absolutely.
Right. And, but then I realized, the book doesn't really talk about integrity in a crisis. So the publisher, I get on the phone with the publisher, we talk about it for a while. And he's like, look, you got some great points about integrity in a crisis. And let's stop right now. Let's add another chapter. We'll push the book back another month and a half, but it's important. And this is such a life-changing, world-changing event. We need to address it in the book. So that's why we pushed it back. And I'm actually just working on the draft of it right before we got on this call.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. I actually feel a little cheated here because I have the original version of the book sitting in front of me, and now I don't have that
But you got
final
it for
chapter.
free. You
That's
got it for
true.
free.
That,
So
that,
now
that is true.
we're going
That
to make
is
you
the
go out and buy
trade-off.
it.
That is the trade-off. But Startup Nation, if you want the full book, you can go to wherever you get your favorite books, Amazon, Barnes and Noble. You can check out
Local bookstore.
local bookstore. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And if you're listening to the replay on the podcast, you can click the link in the show notes for easy access. So, Rob, I want to ask you this because I think you really set the tone early in the book for what it talks about, and you sum it up with a very short but powerful quote, and it says, "quote Ambiguity." Ambiguity is the enemy of integrity. End quote. And and I thought that was just so profound. But kind of talk about why not hiding and playing around in those gray areas is so important when it comes to integrity and ethics in a company.
Well, I learned it from a guy at Duke University by the name of Dan Ariely. Dan Ariely is a behavioral scientist at Duke University, and he's written a number of books. He's even got a movie. Not so many behavioral psychiatrists or psychologists have a movie, but he's got a movie called Dishonesty. He's got a bunch of great TED Talks. He studies dishonesty. This is what he does for a living.
Right.
He does a number of fascinating experiments. So I talk about a couple of them in the book. But his point is that we all think we have integrity, right? We all think that we're good people. But in reality, we're actually kind of easy on ourselves, right? Because we all see the world through our own eyes.
Right.
And in every situation, we tend to be biased toward ourselves. And we'll give ourselves the benefit of the doubt, and we'll fudge a little bit. I'll give you an example of one of his experiments.
Sure.
He fills up a room with students and gives them a sheet of math problems and says, I'm not going to give you enough time to do all the math problems, but start doing the math problems. And when I tell you to put your pencil down, put your pencil down. So time starts. People are working on math problems. He says, stop. He says, I want you to come up to the front of the room with your paper. I want you to put your worksheet, your math problems that you've been working on, I want you to put them in a shredder right here in the front of the room. And then I want you to tell the proctor, how many problems did you finish? And for every problem you tell the proctor that you finished, you're going to get $1. Right? So what he doesn't tell people is that the shredder only shreds the outer edges of the piece of paper. He actually knows exactly how many problems everybody in the room has done.
Gotcha.
So, Dominic, what percentage of people do you think tell the truth in a situation like that?
I don't want to be lazy and go 50-50. I'm gonna go 70-30 in favor of the truth.
It's actually the opposite.
Oh, wow.
Only 30% of people tell the truth.
Wow.
And he's done this. He's replicated this experiment. Tens of thousands of people, different places all around the world, different socio and economic backgrounds. It doesn't matter. Everybody fudges. Everybody fudges a little bit. Now, most of them don't cheat by a wide margin. They'll do it just by a couple of problems.
Gotcha.
But they can do that because they can still, if they're just fudging a little bit, they can still feel good about themselves. And that's the point about integrity. People will do things that are slanted in their favor as long as they can still feel good about themselves. So what he does on the next experiment, he does the same experiment, but this time at the beginning of the experiment, he says to everybody, before you start on the math problems, I want you to write down as many of the 10 commandments as you can remember at the top of the page.
Gotcha.
Now, nobody can remember all 10 of the 10 commandments, right? But it has an interesting impact on the experiment. Cheating goes from 70% down to virtually zero, simply by reminding people of their better selves. Right? So the point behind this is if you create an environment where people are reminded about integrity and where you give people specifics about what's expected of them, the better selves will come out and cheating and lying go down. But if you have an environment where you simply say, okay, do good, and assume everybody's going to do their best, that's an environment of ambiguity where people are free to interpret for themselves what they think is right or wrong. And inevitably, they're going to interpret it in a way that favors their own personal interest.
I hear that.
So that's part of the point of intentional integrity. You need to be specific. You need to talk to people about what's expected of them. And you need to let them know what is allowed, what's not allowed, what's expected and what's not expected. And in that way, you get a higher level of behavior from people.
And Rob, I imagine that's super important, not just for a large company like an Airbnb or eBay, but also for our small business owners and startups as well. Because I imagine that, setting that expectation for, the proper integrity goes a long way when you begin it, not just, that comes from the top, but also comes from, the very start of a company, the very beginning of a venture. So I appreciate you sharing all of that.
Oh, the tone is set at a company right from the beginning.
Right.
And what you find is that it's actually not easy to change course once it's started.
Interesting.
Right. So how you start out in a company when it's small has a big impact on where you end up, because people take their cues from leaders. Right. Mm. And in the early days, obviously, the leader is right there, working side by side, shoulder to shoulder with everybody else. So you are on display and your integrity is on display.
Right.
How you respond to particular situations has a major impact on all those around you. And by the way, those are the people that are going to hire your next generation. And those are the people that are going to be role models for the next group that you hire. So if you don't start off right, if you start off and you're not thinking about integrity, and you are doing a number of things that are ethically challenged, you are going to create a permissive environment where now integrity is like, it's really like a disease in a way. It is contagious.
Right.
It spreads.
Those are facts.
So on the good side, it spreads. Being a positive role model spreads. But if you do not act with integrity, that spreads like wildfire.
Absolutely.
And it's tough to change.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing all of that for sure. And it's funny you mentioned that because, as we're all going through this world pandemic, COVID-19 and stuff like that. And in the beginning days of when it kind of became, I guess, at the forefront of our minds here in the United States, we were seeing people buying pallets and pallets of right before, of hand sanitizer and toilet tissue and stuff like that. And then trying to resell it at this, astronomical rate that's not normal during normal standards, price gouging and things of that nature. So, Rob, I want to ask you this, when it comes to that regard, when it comes to, raising prices at certain moments and stuff like that, when does it get to a point where you're trying to cover certain costs? And when does it get to, in your opinion, get to a point of gouging?
Fascinating ethical question, right? And again, this just gets right back to the point of how everyone is going to look at this.
Absolutely.
Through their own eyes. I'll give you a personal example. I went into a Trader Joe's. It was about 6 weeks ago, I guess now, and I was doing a little shopping, and the one thing I wanted to get was some hand sanitizer. Gotcha. And of course, you couldn't get hand sanitizer anywhere, right? So I noticed there's a worker. I go over to the area where the hand sanitizer was being, and this shelf was empty. So I look at the guy who's a worker there and say, "You guys don't have any hand sanitizer, do you?" And I knew what the answer would be, right? The answer is going to be no, because the answer was no everywhere.
Right.
Only the guy looks at me and he says, "You know what? I think we just got some in the back. I'll be right back."
Gotcha. Okay.
So a minute later, he comes back with a box. And that box has got 48 2-ounce bottles of hand sanitizer. Okay. Not big bottles, but 48 bottles of them.
Right.
He puts it down right in front of me and he looks at me. And I know what he's thinking, and he knows what I'm thinking. The store's closing in 5 minutes, and he's wondering how many bottles is this guy going to buy? Right. Now, a number of options run through my head in that moment, right? I could buy one because there's only one of me, right? And maybe I could let the next 47 people get one bottle.
Right.
They're small bottles, though, Dominic. I mean, maybe it'll be okay for me to get two because they're small. And by the way, I've got a wife, a couple of kids at home.
Right.
What is it okay for me to get 2 bottles for each member of my household?
Right.
You know what? Maybe toilet paper is running low. Maybe I buy all 48 bottles of it, and then I use it to barter with some of those jerks that bought up all the toilet paper the previous month.
Right.
Or maybe I should buy all 48 bottles and drop them off at a retirement home because they probably need it more than I do.
Absolutely.
What's the right ethical answer? And I think the right answer is any of those might be right, depending on your perspective.
Right.
And I was watching an interview on television. They were interviewing a guy who, as soon as it became apparent that items like, the antibacterial wipes and hand sanitizer were going to be popular,
right,
the guy got in his truck. He drove all out into the outlying areas,
right,
and he went to all the little stores and bought up everything he could find. Filled up like one of those storage things.
Yep.
And in fact, they filmed him pulling up the garage door, and the thing was stuffed with this thing, right?
It was.
And he was going to sell it for this amount of money. And they asked him that question. And you know what his response was? He said, "I'm actually doing everyone a favor. I am efficiently getting the product from places where it wasn't yet being used, right, and getting it out to people who need it the most." Right. And isn't it fair, of course, that I should get compensated for my gas, my time, my storage facility, and the like, right? So even someone like this, someone who is the price gouger, the one that we all hate, the one that cleaned out all the shelves and was making a big profit, even that person, looking at it through their own eyes, thinks that what they did is ethical.
Absolutely.
I mean, and so, what I call for, and again, what's the intentional integrity answer? Well, the intentional integrity answer is Trader Joe. What Trader Joe should have done is Trader Joe should have immediately recognized the issues, right, and put up a little sign and said 2 per person per day.
Right.
2 per household per day. In other words, tell us what, as the person that's in the supply chain here, you tell us what you think is ethical, and then we all will live and abide by that same rule, right? Now we're all operating under the same set of rules. Because if I bought one, I guarantee you the next person that came in would buy 47, right? Somebody's going to grab all of them. And then any good that I was really trying to do to others would be washed away. Right. What we need someone to say, hey, this is the right way to do it. We're going to create our values based upon what we believe at Trader Joe's is the right thing to do. And we're going to ask all those who shop here to abide by those values. That, I think, is the better approach. That way you get away from the ambiguity where we're all free to do what we think we can rationalize to ourselves is best.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. And, Startup Nation, what I hear in that answer, it's not just about the small business owner engaging in that integrity and that ethics or whatever the case may be, but also the consumer as well. Because, Rob, you talked about how, should I buy just 2 for me? I also have family members. Should I just buy 2 for each of members of my household? But also being that good neighbor, especially in times like these, requires that, that type of thinking, and make sure we're looking out and thinking about our neighbors as well. So, Rob, I appreciate that.
And by the way, for those, I know everybody's dying to know, I bought 10.
Okay.
I bought 2 for each member of my family.
Fair enough.
That'll be 8 of us.
Right.
And then I bought 2 more for my next door neighbor,
Gotcha,
who often gets the mail for me when I'm out. And I wanted to do a nice little gesture because I know that she could probably use some.
Well,
but that just goes to show that there's not one right ethical answer.
I hear that.
Anybody could come up with an answer. I feel like that was a good number because the bottles were small, but 2 was an appropriate number for me. Right. But why not 1? Why not 3? Why not all 48?
And Startup Nation, in the book, Intentional Integrity, Rob has all of these moments called code moments where it kind of brings up these type of scenarios. And in the back of the book, in the appendix, he has where he furthers the discussion on those code moments. And I really appreciate books like that, Rob, because it extends the content, it extends the conversation to really have those moments to kind of think about, wow, I never thought of it that way, because you were just talking about, based on certain values and upbringings, like, the correct course of action could go in many different ways. But kind of talk about those code moments that you have in the book a little bit, if you would, Rob.
Well, the great thing about, being in the world of ethics and integrity is that you don't have to be very creative. These things, they happen in real life.
I hear that.
So all of the stories that are code moments, they're things that are composites of things that have actually happened, either to me in companies where I've worked, or I've also been an investor and advisor to a number of companies, and I've got friends that work at other companies, and these are all stories that I've collected over my career. So these are things that actually happen in life. When we do ethics integrity training at Airbnb, I don't have to use hypotheticals. I use real examples of things that have actually happened at Airbnb. And there's something that's really compelling about it when you're in the room talking to new employees at Airbnb, and you share with them the stories of things that have actually happened to other employees in their position,
Right.
it's a lot more interesting. It really gets people's attention. And then I tell all the new employees, I say, I guarantee you, sometime in your first year, you're going to have an integrity moment. Something is going to happen that's going to force you to think for a minute about what's the right thing to do here. Not just the legal thing, but maybe it's a vendor that's giving you an expensive present, or trying to influence your buying decision.
Right.
Or maybe you're going to be asked to be an advisor to a company. And is there a conflict of interest? Or your supplier is offering you a particularly good price, but where is the supplier getting their goods?
Right.
And what sort of labor is making the goods that you're buying? And should that matter to you? Or maybe it's just an office party where alcohol's being served. How much should you be drinking at a party? Right. Interesting questions that everybody gets confronted with every day. And it's I think, important to think about that stuff and think about it in advance.
Absolutely. Rob, if I could, quick follow-up question, because you talked about, your role at Airbnb as the chief ethics officer, and you implemented the program Integrity Belongs Here. Kind of talk about that, what that looks like, and what are some of those key tenets you try to get over to like new associates there at Airbnb?
Yeah. I'll first of all talk about what it's not.
Sure. Okay.
Because originally, the whole program started for me when I was the general counsel, and Me Too was coming at that point, and then other Techlash started. Uber started getting pounded for the way that things that were going on inside of the company.
Right.
And I thought, oh man, I'd rather learn from some other people's mistakes here. What can we do to avoid these sorts of problems, right? Because our founders are great, really good guys, and they want to do the right thing.
Absolutely.
But we got 5,000 people. By the way, those 5,000 people are in different countries. They may have they do have very different socioeconomic backgrounds, different religions. What one person thinks is good or right may be very different from someone else and their legitimate view about it. So I started thinking about the question. This is the question that motivated the book. How do you drive integrity into the culture of a company? How do you do it? And I'll tell you, what are the traditional ways that companies do? Well, the first thing, they start with a code of ethics. And the code of ethics is something they usually download off the internet from another company. Right. And they take the other company's logo off and put their logo on top. And then they email it out to everybody in the company and say, okay, everybody, here's our code of ethics. Check a box to certify that you've read it. And then that's it. You never hear about it again. Nobody ever talks about it. Or that you get a compliance poster, one of those laminated things for $20 that fit your state, and you put it up on the wall in your break room.
Gotcha.
That nobody ever reads. It's got the little 4-point font. Or maybe you make everybody watch one of those sexual harassment videos that are an hour or too long that some third party produces that everybody hates watching.
Absolutely.
And it struck me that those sorts of things, everybody seems to know that you're doing it because you got to check a box legally. You got to fulfill a legal requirement. It just has to be done. And everybody looks at it that way.
Absolutely.
They treat it like, oh, do we really have to do this?
Right.
Or, oh yeah, legal needs me to check that box. I haven't checked it yet. Right. That doesn't send a very powerful message about being important. And it doesn't say integrity is important here. So I went to Brian Chesnut, the founder, and talked to him about this. And Brian's looked at me and I said to him, look, I think we need to do more. I'm not sure what it looks like yet, but we need to do more. And he looked at me in typical Brian fashion and said, go big. Right. And so we did. We actually started rethinking, because integrity is important to us. Don't be afraid. So many people are afraid to talk about integrity. Let's talk about it. So we started with an orientation program. All new employees already go through orientation at Airbnb. It's a week-long program, 20 to 25 classes you go through. It's pretty extensive. So I went to the orientation folks and said, give me an hour. And they said, an hour? You want an hour to talk about ethics and integrity? Are you trying to drive people away from the company? We're trying to welcome them in. I said, no. I said, I think we can do this in a way that's fun. And they said, well, we do blind surveys at the end of orientation. So, let's see how people react to it. And my fear was that people would be, this is some old guy talking about morals. I don't want to hear it.
Right.
A month later, Dominic, that class was the number one ranked class by new employees in all of orientation. People were coming up to me. I had a woman come up to me a couple months ago, one of the last ones I did before the offices got closed.
Right.
She had tears in her eyes. And she said, I worked at X, big company in the Valley before this. She said, and I left because my manager kept propositioning me. And she said, I didn't feel comfortable reporting it. She said, if a leader of that company had gotten up and stood up in front of people and actually talked about this openly and made it clear that that sort of behavior wasn't welcome. She said, if I had heard that message at my last company, I'd still be working at the last company and I'd have reported it. And she looked at me and she said, you have no idea what it means to me to work for a company that really cares about this sort of thing. And I've gotten that message over and over again that, look, the place that you work is your personal brand and you want to be proud of it.
Absolutely.
You want to work in a place that has values that are consistent with your own. And the word that I kept getting over and over again was, wow, I've never heard a company talk about this openly before, and it feels good. So I think my first message in with this program is you need to create a code of ethics that is your own, not something that you download off the internet, because that doesn't feel real. Get a group of employees together, maybe start with somebody else's code of ethics, but put it in your own language. Our program has a name. Basically it's like a marketing program. It's called Integrity Belongs Here.
Right. And
it comes from the fact that at Airbnb, our mission is around belonging. We try to create belonging through immersive travel. So any meetings you go to at Airbnb, any company meetings, everyone's always talking about belonging. So we took the word belonging and said, all right, our program is going to be called Integrity Belongs Here. The code of ethics is something that was written by employees. We got a group together, a good cross-functional group, a diverse group, to help write the code and make sure that it was something that was aligned with our company's purpose and values. And then it was something that it wasn't owned by legal, or it wasn't owned by the CEO. It was something that a wide number of people felt like they had input in. And then when we put it out, we actually had meetings with all the teams in groups of 50 people and had a conversation with them about it and used real life examples of how real life examples would play out under the code. And it got everybody engaged with it. And it got everybody feeling like, wow, this is really important if a leader at Airbnb is actually taking the time to go around and talk to the teams about it. And if the document isn't some legal thing that the law firm gave us, if it's something that's actually written by employees, maybe I better look at it, pay attention to it. It becomes more real.
Startup Nation, what I hear in that answer that Rob just gave is that, look, that part of, the Integrity Belongs Here program, or the code of ethics, if you will, that you implement in your company, it doesn't necessarily have to just be all exclusive and unilaterally come from the top. I think it's also important to incorporate your team members in part of the process to creating that code of ethics to ultimately create that culture. So, Rob, I appreciate you sharing all of that for sure.
Well, no, Dominic, it doesn't have to come from the top, but
right.
What is important is that the top has to buy in.
Absolutely.
So you're wasting your time if you try to create a code of ethics and an integrity program at a company,
I hear that.
and the leader isn't bought into it, right? In fact, you're almost worse off because then you look hypocritical. So any rule that's in the code of ethics, what we did was I went to the executive team. I'm on the executive team at the company. I went to the rest of the executive team and said, all right, here are some key elements of the code. But before we make it official, before we start sending it out and talking about it, I want to make sure that everybody in the room is bought in. And by bought in, I mean, not only do you have to abide by it, but if somebody on your team breaks the rule, and I don't care if it's the best employee on your team, you've got to follow through, and there have to be consequences. And the best example of this was romance at work. So many problems we've seen when leadership, CEOs, end up using their position to get somebody at the a lower level employee to have sex with them or to get involved in some sort of romantic relationship.
Right.
And these things always seem to end up coming back, embarrassing the leader, embarrassing the company. So I went into the rest of the executive team and said, I propose that the executive team, this only applies to the top 12 people in the company.
Gotcha.
But for the 12 of us, we should not be having a romantic relationship with anyone in the company. Why don't we just agree as part of our rules that if you're on the executive team at the company, you're a leader at the company, you will not have a romantic relationship with anyone else at the company. And you know what? There was silence for a moment when I proposed it. One person laughed and said, oh, Rob, we all are married or in relationships anyway, so it shouldn't really matter. Mm-hmm. And I said, I know it shouldn't matter, but from what I read online, being married doesn't stop people from doing this sort of thing, right?
Absolutely right.
So I said, again, everybody, are you in? Do you want to do this? And we talked about it. And then what we did is we went around the room and each person had to say, I'm in. And by doing it that way, we all committed to each other that this was something we were going to follow. And then we put it in our code of ethics. Then we talked about it to the rest of the company. I'm sure it broke a lot of hearts that the executives were off limits. Right. Actually, not at all, right? but I'll tell you, by being specific about it, by not leaving it vague, right? We were very specific about it. We committed to it with each other. It's a lot less likely to be a problem. And by the way, if it becomes a problem, it's pretty easy to deal with, because who's going to be held responsible? The person that broke the rule.
All right, Startup Nation, so we're going to go ahead and take a quick break. We got to pay some bills. Once again, my name is Dominic Lawson, and you're listening to The Startup Life. This fresh coat of the Startup Life has been sprayed on nice and smooth by Wagner and the Flexo series of paint sprayers. Startup Nation, my wife decided she wanted to rehab her childhood home. The goal was to fix it up and invite a nice family to rent it out. We knew one of the biggest jobs we had to undertake was painting. However, from the walls, the cabinets, and even the siding outside, it was going to be a big task. As entrepreneurs with a company to run, we knew this was going to take up a lot of our time, which is why we decided to get a paint sprayer. And after much research, we decided to go with the sprayer from the Flexio series from Wagner. Startup Nation, these sprayers are top-notch because of its flexibility to paint or stain walls, furniture, cabinets, and more. It's 10 times faster than using a paintbrush, which was a big selling point for us. And you can paint or stain right from the can. It's also easy to clean in 5 minutes, and being great for indoor and outdoor projects, a paint sprayer from the Flexio series clearly needs to be part of the arsenal in your garage. So if you're ready to stain your deck, or like me, fill your daughter's request of a bubblegum pink room, up your game with a paint sprayer from the Flexio series by Wagner. Take it from me, your time will thank you. This episode of The Startup Life is sponsored by SaveTheChildren.org. Startup Nation, Save the Children believes every child deserves a future. In the United States and around the world, they work every day to give children a healthy start in life, the opportunity to learn, and protection from harm. They deliver lasting results for millions of children, including those hardest to reach. They do whatever it takes for children every day, and in times of crisis, transforming their lives and the future we share. Startup Nation, right now, the coronavirus is the biggest global health crisis in our lifetime. It threatens children in every way. COVID-19 has already left many children without caregivers, out of school, and exposed to violence and exploitation. Child poverty is rising. With your support, we can help children in unsafe households and help support distance learning in the face of school closures. Here are some ways your support can make a difference. For just $5, you can buy a baby's first book, providing comfort and inspiring lifelong learning. And for $25, you can serve a nutritious breakfast and lunch to 5 out-of-school children in need. And there's many other ways you can help support Startup Nation. So go to SaveTheChildren.org/SaveKids or www.SaveTheChildren.org/SaveKids. So if you're ready to make a difference, Startup Nation, remember SaveTheChildren.org. Make the change for children. The Startup Life is powered by Ladder. Startup Nation, as an entrepreneur, you are the engine that powers your business. We have had many entrepreneurs on the show, from those that played Division II basketball, quite a few Ironman participants, and even an NFL quarterback. And the one thing they all have in common is that they know getting early morning workout wins leads to business success for the day. However, it's super important what fuel you use for your workout to get that early morning success. And that's where Ladder comes in. Ladder is a sports nutrition company founded by LeBron James and Arnold Schwarzenegger. Unlike other supplements, every batch is tested by a third party that is trusted by all major professional sports organizations, including the NBA, NFL, MLB, and more to verify the highest standards for quality, but more importantly, safety. Ladder's goal is to help you unlock your best in any situation. Right now, that means access to special offers and expert advice from their community. Personally, I like superfood greens. Not only does it include the most essential nutrients that are hard to get in your diet, like magnesium, zinc, B vitamins, and vitamin D, they also included the Rodelio root, which helps keep you healthier when stress is high, but also it helps support immunity according to many studies. Use code BETTEREVERYDAY for 30% off everything site-wide at ladder.sport. That's BETTEREVERYDAY for 30% off at ladder.sport. So maybe you're not trying to be a 4-time league MVP or a 7-time Mr. Olympia, but you still need the tools to elevate your health that elevates your business. So go with Ladder and prepare to get better every day. All right, Startup Nation, welcome back as we continue our conversation with today's guest here on The Startup Life. Once again, Startup Nation, we're talking to Rob Chesnut, Chief Ethics Officer of Airbnb. So, Rob, you also talking about in your book that, you were just talking earlier about how those long, drawn-out videos made from a third-party vendor, as far as like about sexual harassment, they come boring and they're kind of used to check a box. But you also say that engaging in and having a code of ethics and engaging in integrity doesn't have to necessarily be a buzzkill. It doesn't have to be like a killjoy. Just kind of talk about that a little bit, if you would.
I think humor is a very effective way to get your point across. And there's no rule that says that ethics has to be boring.
Right.
And the good news is everybody thinks it's going to be boring. So expectations in this area are so low that if you have a little bit of fun with it, I've been really surprised about how it resonates with people. So, one thing we did, I took a look at the sexual harassment videos. Everybody complains about having to do them. Nobody enjoys it. I talked to my daughter about it. My daughter's 19 years old.
Mm-hmm.
They made her watch it when she got a job at a restaurant in town.
Right.
And she talked about how all the restaurant staff just blew it off. And I said, well, what can we do then to get the point across? And she said, you should do cup of tea. I said, what's cup of tea? She said, cup of tea is this video, she said, that we watched. She said, when I was at a college summer program the year before at Carnegie Mellon. She said, it's a 5-minute long video. It's stick figures. And it compares getting consent to have sex with someone and comparing it to asking someone if they want a cup of tea. And she said, it's funny. She then, for 10 minutes, excitedly tells me all about this video, right? A year and a half later, she remembers this 5-minute video.
Right.
And so then she runs to her computer, gets the computer, pulls up YouTube, and there it is. The thing's got like 9 million views on YouTube. And it's great. And it's funny. It's short. It makes a point. So, and then my daughter said, if it's longer than 5 minutes, nobody's going to pay attention. So I'm like, wow, okay, that's pretty powerful, but it makes a lot of sense. So I said to myself, you know what? There's no reason why we can't make a 5-minute video and make a point and make it a little bit funny. So what we decided to do was every month we make a short video on something that has to do with ethics, different topic every month. And the only rule is we record it on an iPhone. This is nothing fancy. Anybody can do this.
Right.
We just come up with a funny scenario that relates to the topic. So we might have one scenario might be planning for a holiday party where people are buying a lot of alcohol and planning to get wasted, or somebody who is doing interview questions and asking all the wrong, inappropriate interview questions.
Right.
And we do these little videos. And the rule I made was, we're only going to spend an hour filming. There won't be a formal script. We'll just have some ideas. We'll kind of go with it. Won't be professional. Acting will be terrible. But it'll be Airbnb employees doing it.
Right.
And then we're going to send it out by email. We're not going to force anybody to watch it. We'll put the pressure on ourselves to make it good enough. So right now, every month, between 1,000 and 2,000 employees at Airbnb voluntarily watch an ethics video.
Interesting.
Right? And the response has been incredible. People stop me in the hallway. They stop me on the street between buildings, laughing about the video. I have people that say they binge watch all the videos, or they have a group that gets together and watch the videos. They have ideas for videos. They want to appear. How can they be an actor in one of the videos? I'm known as the video guy around Airbnb, which is kind of funny for a lawyer. You know, like a 30-year experience. I'm known for videos because believe me, I know nothing about how to make a film.
Gotcha.
But they got a little bit of humor, and the fact that no one's forced to watch it and their friends are in it actually makes it something that gets through to people, and they enjoy it and they have fun with it. And that's something any company can do and have a little fun with.
Once again, Startup Nation, the book is Intentional Integrity, How Smart Companies Can Lead an Ethical Revolution. You can pick that up. Once again, that is available today. You can pick that up at your local big bookstore. We also have a link there in the show notes for easy access if you're listening to the replay on the podcast. You know, Rob, kind of talk about your experience as a whole working at Airbnb. What's Brian Chesky, the founder of Airbnb, kind of talk about what's it like working with him, and what's it like working at Airbnb as a whole?
A lot of people don't know this about Brian. Brian's parents were social workers up in upstate New York.
Okay.
And Brian never went to business school. You think of most business CEOs as business school, finance, management trained. Brian was a design student. Brian went to the Rhode Island School of Design, where they emphasize, by the way, ethical design. And Brian's parents grew up with a real focus on doing right and doing good. So Brian's focus, I think, at Airbnb is a little different than a typical company. Brian believes in doing the right thing over the long run, and not doing something that's just going to boost your stock price up for this particular week or this particular month.
Right.
Brian would rather do the right thing by the community and then do something that makes a little bit more money. And by acting this way and by focusing on the right thing, Brian's focus will actually, we believe, is much, much better for the long run. We think the business will do better in the long run because we're focused on trying to do what's right, as opposed to focusing so much exclusively on what the right short-term financial answer is. Brian calls it an infinite time horizon. A lot of business CEOs are worried about, I got to hit the number this quarter. I've got to hit this particular metric, and that's important. But Brian takes a broader view. So a traditional business, in much of my adult life, businesses have had one stakeholder, and that is the investors.
Right.
Whatever's right for shareholders, that's what you've got to do. And by the way, that concept has been evolved, I think, into whatever's best for shareholders in the short term is what you've got to do.
Right.
Brian's believes in a multiple stakeholder approach. And that is, your investors are an important stakeholder and their interests are important and they need to be considered when you're making important decisions.
Right.
However, there are other stakeholders that are important. Employees are important. Your customers are important. So at Airbnb, it's guests are important and hosts are important. And the community is important. So how you impact the broader community also really matters and needs to be considered when you're making a business decision. So when you make an important decision, inevitably it will hurt at least one stakeholder. It's hard to be making a business decision that's good for employees, good for all your customers, good for your bottom line, and good for the community.
Right.
But in the long run, if you consistently make decisions that ignore one of those stakeholders or benefit only one, that's where you get in trouble as a company. So Airbnb believes that you need to sit back, look at your decisions, consider the impact of your decisions on all stakeholders, and make sure over time that you're paying the right amount of attention to each of the stakeholder groups. You don't just consistently focus on one. And by doing that, you'll build a more valuable business for the long term. By the way, this is an approach that, when Brian first started talking about it, not a lot of people were talking about it.
Right.
But just in the last year, like the Business Roundtable, with that bastion of capitalism.
Absolutely.
There were, all the major, it seems like, major CEOs from all the top companies are members. They have adopted this approach. the belief that companies have more that they need to focus on than just their shareholders. They've endorsed this multi-stakeholder approach. And look, Dominic, I believe that the world's got a lot of big problems. And
Absolutely.
I've lost faith in government's ability to solve them all. I think government plays a role in it.
Absolutely.
But government seems to be very deadlocked with partisanship. I believe that business can play a powerful role in solving some of the world's biggest problems. But business needs to step up and recognize that it has to have a mission and a purpose. And if you're ask yourself, I'd ask each of the members of Startup Nation out there,
Absolutely.
What's your purpose? Why does your business exist? And if your answer is to make a profit, then I don't think that your business is going to be successful in the long run. Profit is not purpose. Now, hopefully you'll make a profit, but the profit should be folded back into, why do you exist? What are you doing for the world that's good? Why do you come to work every day? Now, this is important because, first of all, employees, studies are showing that people want to make a positive contribution to the world when they go to work every day. They want to believe that when they're in there working hard, that there is some broader good that is being done through their hard work. They want to be inspired. They want to have a mission that inspires them. So you're going to get longer tenured, more inspired, more motivated employees if you have a mission that somehow is tied to a greater good in the world. And customers want the same thing. Data is showing that customers are increasingly looking to do business with companies whose values are aligned with their own. And that's why data is also showing that companies that are perceived as ethical, companies that are perceived to have integrity, are outperforming the market. And they're outperforming companies that have no purpose or whose ethics are, not only good, but maybe questionable or bad. So if you're building a business, you need to put some serious thought early on into, why am I existing? What am I doing that's good in the world? How is my mission going to inspire employees and customers to want to do business with me? Because if you don't, in the long run, somebody else is going to come up with a company that is so inspired, and it's going to beat you.
I want to ask a follow-up question because you talked about, government and partisanship and stuff like that. As you know, we're in an election cycle, and I want to remind Startup Nation that we are an apolitical show, and that, we really try to just help entrepreneurs and Startup Nation to kind of do the best for their businesses and stuff like that. But sometimes you can't ignore things in government and because they do affect small business. But I want to ask you this, for those who are running for election, running for a re-election at the government, at the federal level, state level, or local level, what are some of those ethical things that they should be mindful of, from like campaign donations to things like that? But also kind of like going back to what you were saying earlier, what are some of those things they should really think about as far as like leading the way to help small businesses, leading the way to help their constituents and things of that nature? Kind of share with me a little bit about that, if you would, Rob.
I have been discouraged with politics, and by the way, this has nothing to do with any one particular party. I don't think either party has issues here. I do worry that too many politicians are focused on what's good for their party or what's good for their own personal political benefit.
Right.
What we need from leaders, we need leaders that are thinking about what's right for the world, what's right for our country, what's right for the community that we are elected to be serving. I believe that people are starving for that kind of leadership right now from our politics. And I think people are tired of the partisan bickering and the idea that, we're of politicians that are doing something to help their particular group.
Right.
And aren't thinking bigger than that. I do see, we've already seen it coming in business. We've seen this wave in the last several years of demanding more from companies, demanding more from leaders, tired of the old bad behavior of leadership, and leaders who are enriching themselves personally, financially, in so many ways, and yet not delivering for their communities. We've already seen a backlash against business, and we're seeing now, I think, a powerful trend toward doing good in business. I think we're going to see that sort of thing in politics. And my message to leaders of politics is that the broader communities want this from you. And if you can deliver on that, if you could do something that it shows that it's not just about you getting reelected or doing something that follows your party's interest, but standing up for something that you believe is right, I think that people will respect that and love it. But we need it from our politics right now.
You mentioned her earlier, Rob. You talked about working for Meg Whitman, who just jump started Quibi, who's the CEO of
She's a Quibi, right?
Yeah, Quibi, stuff like that. Kind of talk about what it was like, working for her at eBay and things of that nature.
I have a lot of respect for Meg as a leader. I'll never forget early on, one of my first jobs at eBay was to figure out what can you legally buy and sell on eBay. Back in those days, people were talking like, well, it's the internet. Does the law even apply online? What laws apply online? Right. What can you sell on eBay? Can you sell guns? Can you sell tobacco, alcohol? Can you sell breast milk, for example? Can you sell a kidney? Right. Because people need organs. These are things that are appearing on eBay. And so I never forget, Meg took me aside and she said, all right, Rob, you got to figure this out. I'm like, wow. But they figured, well, I'm the lawyer. I was a prosecutor, so I must know the law. So figure out what the law should be online. And I'll never forget, she said, Rob, that we have a great business. Mm-hmm. She said, we do quite well. We're booming in so many areas. She said, Rob, don't get close to the line. Do the right thing. So I had permission right from the beginning to make decisions that might have a short-term negative financial impact for the company, but were designed to protect the brand in the long run. Because I think Meg realized that, early on people were using the phrase, "Well, it's only a platform. It's only a platform. eBay's not responsible." And I'm like, I don't think that's actually right. If it's on the eBay website, if it's being hosted by that, like it or not, it reflects on your brand. And you can't deny responsibility. And you can't say, it really doesn't matter. And then pocket money from it. Right. Like it or not, the world is going to force you at some point to make some tough decisions about, does this belong on your website? Is your business, do you want your business associated with something like this? A great example is a company called Cloudflare dealt with this last year. I read about this in the book. Cloudflare is a company that protects websites from hacker attacks and from denial of service attacks and the like. So if you want your website to be able to operate effectively online, you need a security service, and Cloudflare is one of the companies that provides it. Right. And there was a website called 8chan that was sort of in the dark corners of the internet, in that there were people on that website that were promoting violence. Literally encouraging the sort of shooting incidents at schools and glorifying people who did it. Now, that website was out of reach. It was being operated in some dark corner of the earth, and it's hard to keep a website completely off the internet. But Cloudflare's services were protecting it from attacks. And so people went to Cloudflare and said, hey, what are you doing protecting, doing business with a company like this? And their initial reaction was, oh, well, we don't look at that at the underlying websites. We just have our mission is to broadly just protect anybody, regardless of what their product or service is. Right. The world didn't like that very much, and pressure quickly ratcheted up. It's like, well, how can you protect a site like this? How can you make money getting paid from a company like this? And the CEO came around and said, you know what? We don't feel good about this, and we're not going to do it anymore. And they dropped him. And I just think the world expects companies to take a stand, take a principled stand on things. And this is just one example of it, just like what we did at eBay. I remember we had a huge backlash at eBay because someone took communion from the Pope. And instead of chewing the wafer,
right,
they took the wafer and hid it.
Wow.
And left with it. And then they tried to auction it off on eBay.
Wow.
Well, as you might imagine, it's not illegal
right.
to auction off a wafer that's given to you. But the members of the Catholic Church were enraged. They started to organize a boycott of eBay, saying that we were allowing this. The phrase was, "We're selling the body of Christ," because the wafer represents to them the body of Christ.
Right.
And so we had to take a position. To what extent are we going to ban something that is offensive? And offensive to whom? And how are we going to distinguish between something that's offensive to one religious group or something that might be offensive to just a few people in a non-religious sense? It requires you to make some difficult judgment calls sometimes. And it's an area where companies are reluctant to go. But we ended up banning it, and banning things like Nazi memorabilia as well, even World War II Nazi items, simply because there's certain things you simply don't want your brand associated with. And you want companies that are going to raise the bar, I think, when it comes to social discourse and integrity. And these are questions you're just going to have to confront if you want to do that.
Got a quick follow-up, if I may, because, when you worked at eBay and you worked at Chegg and stuff like that, and we have a lot of people who are in Startup Nation who are not necessarily entrepreneurs, but they do work the traditional 9 to 5. And so I want to ask this, is there still an ethical obligation? Let's say you have one job and you get promoted or you get hired at another job. Is there still an ethical obligation to the previous job?
Yeah, there is. Okay. If you leave a company, I think you have an obligation at a minimum not to take with you property,
gotcha,
or confidential information that belongs to your previous employer. That still belongs there. So your obligations can also include you in a number of states. Companies tell employees, we don't want you to recruit away our employees. So if you're going to leave and go to another company, that's fine. You've got the right to do that.
Right. But
what you can't do is then call all of your friends at the old company and try to bring them over as well. So you may have that kind of an obligation.
Gotcha.
I was talking to some engineers. And the engineers were telling me that, in some cases they may still have access to the code that they wrote at their previous company. There may be a place online that housed all the code, and if their old company didn't cut them off, they may still have a password. They may be able to log in and still see the code that they wrote at their old company. And one of them asked, well, if I'm working on a similar project at my new company, can I just go in and get the code that I wrote? And the answer is no, you can't. If you wrote code for a company, in all likelihood, the terms of your employment are such that that code belongs to the company. That belongs to you. Gotcha. So you have an obligation, even if you still have a password to it. I instruct all the engineers at Airbnb, don't go back in. That doesn't belong to you anymore. And by the way, there'll be a record of the fact that you went in and logged in and got it. And that would be very embarrassing to our company and very embarrassing to you professionally. Right. That's theft. So, don't do it. So, you may end up you may have certain obligations to your previous company. It's good to think about this when you're making the transition.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that, because I wanted to make sure I got that in there for people who are thinking about, going to a different company and stuff like that. Just remember, there are still those ethical obligations to kind of adhere to as well. Thank you for answering that, Rob, for sure. So sure. I want to ask you this. So, given our new normal, we're sheltering in place a lot of places and stuff like that. And I know a lot of us are kind of missing our sports a little bit. I know you're a big baseball guy. Baseball was supposed to start, this past, April 1st or something like that. So what are you kind of doing right now to get your sport fix? As we're, kind of dive into this.
Oh, I love basketball. I'm a big University of Virginia basketball fan. We were the national champions last year,
Absolutely.
and I think we were positioning ourselves for another run.
Gotcha.
Yeah, you know what? It's been hard. But one thing I do is I try to get out and shoot baskets myself. My son and I have a basketball challenge where we have an ongoing 3-point and foul shooting contest against each other.
Okay.
And if there are times at night where I'll flip on the television and they're replaying a lot of old games. Mm-hmm. And the good news is my memory's not fabulous, so I don't remember who won the games half the time. So I found myself getting engrossed in a college football game the other day that I might have seen 5 years ago, but I didn't remember who won, and it was still a good, entertaining game.
I hear that.
So I probably, obviously I'm not a big TV guy generally. And I'm not watching sports on TV nearly as much, but I'll still watch a little bit in those sort of circumstances. And I'll enjoy a few of the old games that we see being replayed. And that may be what we get for a while. Right. We may just have to. That may be the new normal.
And Rob, I looked on your Twitter feed, and you can follow Rob on Twitter. We have a link there in the show notes for easy access if you're listening to the replay on the podcast. I was looking at your Twitter feed, and I saw that you have something called Integrity Awards.
Integrity Yetis.
Yeah, kind of share with us a little bit about that and what the intent was there.
Well, it's something we developed at Airbnb around the idea that if you want to encourage behavior, a certain type of behavior, you need to reward it. You need to recognize it. And it's so, what you never hear companies actually rewarding anyone for an act of integrity. And I thought, you know what, we can change that. I don't have a big budget, but there's no reason why you can't. If somebody raises an interesting ethical question, if somebody raises their hand and asks a good question about ethics, why not encourage that sort of atmosphere? You want to encourage an atmosphere where people talk about ethics and integrity and raise interesting questions. So at Airbnb, what we did was we got these really nice water bottles, because everybody's got nice water bottles these days because we're trying to use less plastic and be environmentally conscious. And I know there's this company, they're called Yetis. And I just happen to love their water bottles. Very high quality, really nice steel, big water bottles, because I like a lot of water. Right. So it struck me that if you combine the word Yeti with integrity, you can call it an Integrity Yeti. And so what we did was we got some of the Yeti, you can customize these Yeti water bottles. We got them customized with the Airbnb logo, with the Integrity Belongs Here wording on there. Right. And I started carrying them with me when I would do talks at Airbnb. And if somebody in the audience asked a good integrity-related question, I'd say, "You've won an Integrity Yeti." And then everybody would start clapping. And I tossed the Integrity Yeti out. And people, really, these things actually became quite popular. People keep them on their desk. They're very nice water bottles. But everybody in the room, you got 50, 100 people in the room, you just send a message from a leader in the company that we want to hear this. We want to hear you thinking about what integrity means and asking questions. So you're sending a positive message out to folks. So it worked out really well at eBay. At Airbnb. So I've got my book out. So I decided to make up a batch of them with the logo from my book and the website, www.intentionalintegrity.com. Mm-hmm. And we put that on some Yetis. And so now what I'm doing online is I'm giving out awarding an Integrity Yeti every week to a company or to a person that is acting or done something with integrity during the crisis, just as a way of sending out positive reinforcement when companies or leaders do the right thing. Right. I think if you want to see more of that sort of behavior, you got to congratulate them. You got to call them out. Everybody loves to be praised when they do something well. So if we want to see better behavior from companies and leaders, let's make sure that we call them out in a positive way and recognize when they do it. And the Integrity Yeti is just a fun way of that kind of recognition.
I hear that. Thank you for sharing that. So I want to ask you this. We always ask all of our guests what their entrepreneurial superpower is. What's yours, Rob, and why?
I think mine would be a sense of humor.
Okay.
And I think, and I say that because as a lawyer, and somebody that talks about ethics, the last thing people expect when they meet me is a sense of humor.
That's true.
So a sense of humor used well can disarm people. It can make people feel comfortable, and it frankly also makes it you someone that people enjoy being around. And if you want to be successful in business, a lot of business is people. You're in the people business,
right?
And if you're in the people business, you got to keep a smile on your face. You got to be likable. You got to be the kind of person, the kind of leader that people enjoy being around. If you disarm them with humor, if you have a little bit of fun, you care about them personally, it's a way of showing authenticity that I think can be a superpower and help you accomplish things that sometimes people who don't have a sense of humor and are just always hard and intense,
right,
they can't reach. So I'd say using a sense of humor to make a point would be a superpower for me.
I can definitely see that for sure, Rob. Thank you for sharing that as well. And before I ask the last question, I just want to say thank you so much, Rob Chesnut, for coming on the Startup Life. You definitely gave amazing value and shared some great thoughts about integrity and ethics and making sure we adhere to those. And that also, one thing I thought it was curious was very interesting to me is that you can use ethics and integrity as a brand itself. So I'm very glad we got that. Once again, Startup Nation, the book is Intentional Integrity, How Smart Companies Can Lead an Ethical Revolution. You can get that book today at your local bookstore, or if you're listening to the replay on the podcast, the link is there in the show notes for easy access. So Rob, I'm actually going to turn the microphone over to you because there's somebody out there who's feeling a little stuck in their business, feeling a little afraid, and you've had this amazing career in business. So for those who are feeling a little stuck or afraid to even get started, kind of share with us a little words of encouragement to take us out for today.
Yeah, I would say think of others. If success, I think, often means do people care about you, and do people want you to be successful? And a great way to get that rolling is to think about others. So, for example, if you're running a business in town, ask about how something that you do at your business can actually benefit some others. And I find that the more you can think about others and the more you can broaden this idea of stakeholders, the more you find that you will be embraced and respected by others, and the more they will become invested in your success. So I think my best piece of advice would be keep an open mind, be creative, and think about others around you. Think about a broader group of stakeholders and think about how you can help them. And ultimately that will, I think, rebound and come back to help you.
For sure. Thank you so much. And that's going to wrap up this session of The Startup Life with Rob Chesnut, Chief Ethics Officer of Airbnb. Rob, thank you so much for your time and your energy and your value and your content, man. I really appreciate it.
Dominic, thanks for having me on the show. I appreciate it.
No worries. And as always, Startup Nation, if you have an idea, be about that life, The Startup Life.
If you want to let us know what you think about our show, have an idea for a show topic, or would like to advertise on our show, send us a message on the Startup Life Podcast Facebook page. And while you are there, like and follow our page as well. It's a great way for us to engage with you, Startup Nation, and really grow our community. The link is there in the show notes. Subscribe to the show as it can be heard on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher Radio, Spotify, or even on your Facebook timeline or any other platform you like to get your podcast. If you are listening on Apple Podcasts and you find our content valuable, please give us a 5-star rating, as it will help us climb the charts and help more people find our show. You can also listen to the show on the Startup Life Podcast new website. There you will find the all-new startup blog where I write on many topics that are interesting and helpful to you on your path to entrepreneurship. And hey, if you have an idea, be about that life, the startup life.